Jacqueline.
I told Abel it's really hard to say no to him. So I'm really happy to be here, and I want to thank you for your vision of using this day to remind us about our power and our leadership and why it's needed right now. I don't know if there's a clicker to get started with the slides. While that's being found, I do want to say, yeah, do we know? There we go. Oh, somebody's going to do it for me, even better. I talk really fast, though. Dominican from Washington Heights, so get ready for a speed presentation. I'm really pleased to be here today, and I have to say, it hasn't been that long because I came to California about a year and a half ago to join the amazing team at the Latino Community Foundation. And this team rocks. It's such a privilege to be working with these women at the Latino Community Foundation because they work tirelessly to really lift up our community and to remind us that we lead from a place of strength. And that's what this talk is all about today. I mean, I saw Mario, I see Guillermo, we see each other at events often, and I feel like this idea of organizing is just what we're all about, right? Thank you. So the idea of taking this day and reminding us that, yes, as Libby Schaaf said, that today is about how a few beat the world's best army, right? It might have just been a victory that lasted a short period. However, it was a movement, right? Not a moment. I'm on high with Hamilton. We did honor Luis Miranda at our gala, and I purchased the soundtrack because I love the music from the play, and I keep hearing that song of Rise Up, right? And this idea that we rise up over and over again because it's not a moment, it's a movement. And while we are living right now in some really difficult times, reminded of the crisis daily, of what's happening and how the federal government is imposing the worst that we've seen in a couple of years, since the 80s actually. We've come out of this before. We've been here before, and we have risen up, and we've come out of it stronger. So I hope that today we can recharge, re-energize, and keep moving forward. So we are here to lead from a place of strength. I want to invite you all to just take a moment and breathe deep. Mario, I know you were tired. I hear you. I feel it. And we can take on these battles because in California, we are 15 million strong. I always start from this place because it's something that drove me to California. It's something that gets me up every day, that we are not alone, that there are 15 million Latinos, the largest population of Latinos in the United States, right? So we have a responsibility to keep going back up again and leading because, in fact, the rest of the country is watching what happens here, right? And Californians know how to lead. We also get reminded over and over again about our deficits, but we need to be reminded about our assets for generations, what we've contributed to this country, whether it's in the arts, in entertainment, in the science, in politics. Over and over again, Latinos have shaped the culture of this country, have been a critical part of our history, and I don't need to get into it, but I think we all just need to be reminded over and over again that while we hear 1 in 4 are poor, 3 in 4 are doing well, and we're contributing and paying it forward and supporting our communities, right? The other thing about Latinos, right? I always start with these points. I think they're really important, is that when I think about 8%, congratulations, Pandora. I don't know if Lisa's still in the room. I applaud you, Lisa, for making sure that Latinos are well represented here. But the reality is, too, that Latinos represent over $3 trillion in terms of consumer power. Latinas alone represent $1.7 trillion in terms of consumer buying power. So when we ask the question, why is less than 1% of Latinas sitting in a corporate room in an executive position, the question really matters because we're the ones that are buying the products. We're the ones that are shaping what these companies produce, right? So we need to be at the table to define what gets put out there over and over again, right? It's this idea that we have so much economic power. And the real question for us, too, is how do we continue to shape not just the workforce, but the leadership in these workforce? And how do we translate this into votes, right? We have so much power when it comes to our numbers. We have so much power when it comes to our economy. But how do we translate this into political power? And that's the focus of the Latino Community Foundation for the next couple of years right now, right? How do we continue, again, not just building a moment, but a movement of civic and political engagement by Latinos? I don't need to repeat. Some of you guys know these numbers. For those of you that have never seen these presentation slides, Abel had me present to their league a couple of months ago, actually. I've refreshed the slides to just talk about what's happened in this 2016 election. But this is the number, again, that drives this conversation, right? We're 15 million strong, but every 30 seconds in the US, actually, it's not just a California number, a Latino turns 18 and becomes eligible to vote. Over 90% of Latinos over the age of 18 will be eligible to vote, right? Eligibility doesn't always translate into actually voting, but there's some serious power, not just in casting our ballots, but those of us who have political aspirations in the room. It's really about shaping the political agenda moving forward. In California, 7 million Latinos eligible to vote. The good news is that last year we saw an uptick in registrations, about 2 million new registered voters, 1 million of them Latinos. We're up to 4.5 million Latinos registered to vote. That's actually pretty good, and considering, which I'll talk about in a second, that California is ahead of the curve. We have so much to be proud of in this state. With Alex Padilla as our Secretary of State, this year we have so much going on that will make it easier for young people to actually get registered and be able to vote as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So here are the numbers, Abel, and actually, can you hear me without the microphone? Hate holding mics. All right, so let me get up here. So here's the good news, right? There has been an uptick in terms of Latino voter impact since the 2008 election. We haven't quite met that 2008. Everybody knows Obama ran for president. It really engaged young people, especially from all walks of life, but Latinos especially really came out to vote. So this is the good news, right? That we are on the rise in terms of showing up. 59% of Latinos in the United States actually voted for the 2016 election. It's actually a pretty good number. The downside of all of this is that 90 million stayed home. And given all that was at stake, not the personalities, not Trump and Hillary, this was the fact that we had the Supreme Court justice at the table, right? That nominations were going to happen within this campaign, within this presidential election. These numbers were really important, and yet 90 million Latinos didn't vote. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So here in California, I wanted to use this to show, again, this is from Mindy Romero from the California Civic Engagement Project. The good news, again, is that the numbers are on the rise, right? We actually had a 7% increase here in California in terms of voter turnout amongst Latinos. Numbers are compared to Asians because they're, again, Latinos are the fastest growing, and then Asians follow that group, right? So that's why these numbers are compared here. But 68% of Latinos actually turned out. It's still not as high, again, as the 2008 election, despite everything that was riding on this current election. So a lot to think about of what we need to do to actually get our people to get out and vote. This is how we actually turned out the vote. Now, of course, my board chair would be here. She'd tell me you have to stay nonpartisan. I think I still have a little bit of room to be political here, and I will. I think we all ask our question, well, who are those 28%, right? They're there, and we have to be respectful of the fact, as much as that's hard for me to say, that Latinos are nonpartisan voters. I'm going to show you a couple of slides from the last couple of years, and there's actually an uptick in California in terms of young millennials here in California that will prefer not to associate with the Democratic or the Republican Party. So again, we have to do some self-reflection as to who is out there representing these parties, who's actually having our issues on the agenda, because that's what matters. We're not after parties here, we're after the issues that we care about. And here we can see how it's not as clear cut, right? We're not always going to turn Republican or Democrat, even though we tend to lean more on the Democratic side. But we have some work to do in really having political parties represent the issues that Latinos care about. So I use the slides again because in part, I wanted it to just put this context here in terms of how do we engage our young people to not just consider voting, but running for office, right? Here you see the breakdown of how Latinos voted. And some of the demographics involved in this actually tells a really interesting story I don't have time to share with you right now. But if you look at Clinton and Sanders, you'll see how there was a lot of gravitation there amongst Latinos with the Sanders campaign. And we should be considering what was on that agenda that actually galvanized that vote. So here, just to be fair, I wanted to show you how it all broke down. I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides. Want to spend some time on this slide and to say, like, we had Gary Seguro do an awesome presentation for us on December post the November 9th election and November 8th election, whatever the day was that we were all in like still in a fog the next day. But Gary Segura reminded us that while Latinos did vote for Trump, there's still a lot of unfavorable people are not just leaning behind them, right? Not standing behind them. That he actually has caused a lot of people to wake up, and that people do feel angry and upset about this. I have so much to say, but I'm trying to measure my words. So I want to bring this up here because I think it's really important. So when and I'll talk a little bit about our campaign of Yo Voy a Votar, we actually partnered with Siren, Mi Familia Vota, and Fathers and Families San Joaquin, and Mark Anthony, Gloria Trevi, and Marc Antonio Solis to actually get Latinos to register to vote leading up to the November election. And we started this in August, and in less than 8 weeks, we actually were able to reach 8 million Latinos and register 6,500 in less than 8 weeks, right? The thing is that we don't have enough boots on the ground in those corners of California where nobody's actually going out engaging Latinos to actually register. And so what the feedback that I get from funders and others is like, well, California is a blue state. California is not so clearly blue. And when we look at certain critical parts of the state here in the Central Valley, that's where we really need to wake things up, right? Like when you look at Fresno and Merced, over 60% of the population is Latino. And I can tell you right now that the majority of them would not be voting on the red side given their current socioeconomic status, right? But we're not engaging them. We're not putting resources in these communities to actually mobilize people, register them to vote, and get them out to vote. And because they're not registered, they're not on anybody's agenda to actually mobilize them, right? So we need, as a community, to figure out how we're going to bring in more resources to these regions of the state to make sure that Latinos are well represented. And it can't just be every 4 years. I get incredibly frustrated. I gave you the numbers and I only pointed out the 4-year national elections. When we look at midterm elections, it just goes down. LA had a recent election and only 7% of Latinos turned out to vote. And part of it is that we're not doing our part to really educate and mobilize and get people out there when it really matters. And we know that local elections really matter. And what's happening with the ACA right now is a reminder that too much power is being given to states right now. And guess what? The folks in some of these counties will dictate what will happen with a lot of the money that the state will have to put in to actually roll certain things out, right? Without getting into too much details, I don't know what's going to happen with the ACA, but it's the mentality that's happening right now in DC to give states back power, right? More power than they have right now. And the governor elections, the mayoral elections, the county elections are so important in some of these, especially the rural places in California. So this is a slide that I was sharing with you before. So Mike Madrid did an awesome presentation on this topic of the nonpartisan voter. Here we see how there's a decline in Latinos actually registering in the Republican Party. It's a linear in terms of Democratic registration, but the uptick is really on the nonpartisan, independent registration. So again, there's an opportunity here to make sure that Latinos are actually not just voting, but shaping the agenda of what's on the political future of California and the US. That's from actually, I won't skip over, that's from our Yo Voy a Votar campaign, which I'm really pleased that we were actually pulled together with our incredible team in 8 weeks. Really quickly, I'm gonna fly through these slides. So California, making it really simple right now for California citizens to actually register to vote. Right now, you can verify your status, find your polling place, check out if your ballot was actually counted, all on the website. We also know that California's 16 and 17-year-olds, not happening in any other state, but here right now can actually pre-register. You don't have to wait till you turn 18. So all your nieces and nephews, your godchildren, tell them, like, they can register now and get ready so that when they turn 18, they're actually ready to vote. The other important piece here is that elected officials will offer Californians the opportunity to actually register on election day, right? There's a deadline right now. Last year was October 24th. So if you weren't registered by that date, you couldn't vote on November 8th. Now, election, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't have my registration card. You can register on the same day. And that's information that you should all be emailing and calling your tias and tios about and letting them know that this can actually happen, because we stay home sometimes because we don't have that card. Here, another thing, most states in the US, when you get your license, you actually are not registered to vote. California has actually made it a default that you are registered to vote. And if you don't want to be registered, you have to click no. That should be the case for all the United States, but California is really leading the way here, and that's really important for us, again, to spread the news in terms of how this can actually work. This is our Yo Voy a Votar campaign. People like Dolores Huerta went out and supported us, and this was really important. This is not just about having a piece of paper and signing up people to register. This is about getting our communities excited and understanding what were the issues at the table, not just at the national election, but at the local election as well. So, we have less than 600 days left for the 218 election. And I gotta say, this is just as important right now as the 2000, even more important, given the fact that who's elected in the current administration right now. But if you think about this, right, in California, 1 seat will be contested in the Senate, 10 seats in the House of Representatives. By the way, all 80 seats locally here will be also up for grab in California. There will be nationally 39 gubernatorial elections, 1 here in California. And the 2020 census is something we don't talk enough about. And I don't know we're gonna have time to discuss that, but we need to ensure that this census will be resourced. It's either 147,000, depending on who you ask, Latinos in California were undercounted in the last census. I'll guarantee you that if we don't hurry up and fill out some of these seats for people who actually care about Latinos and put Latinos first, that 2020 census will be under-resourced. And we will see a redistricting that will really, once again, keep us out of the places that actually matter and where we can actually define some really important races. We have to really make sure that the 2020 census is part of our conversation on why we have to mobilize and organize our communities. Again, I think I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go through this, but my point with this slide is, again, this is not just about voting, it's about getting our young people and investing in our young people to actually think about running for office, right? I'm so proud of the mayor in Stockton, youngest mayor, right? African-American mayor, young person who has the heart and soul of the young people in mind whenever